This is the Data Download, your guide to upping your game when it comes to managing and accessing data in your organization. For Calibra, I'm your host, Jay Millicher. Welcome to the Data Download. AI and ML are certainly not new, but as the field, skills, technology have all grown over the years, this has become more prevalent in so many ways as consumers, as citizens. We wanted to take an opportunity to hear thoughts from experts on how artificial intelligence is being leveraged, the good, the bad, the ugly, and where it's going in the future. Sarah Hoffman leads AI and ML research at Fidelity and has a deep understanding and perspective. Welcome, Sarah. Please tell us more about you and this role that you've got.
Sure. So I am Sarah Hoffman, VP of AI and Machine Learning Research in Fidelity's Innovation Department, FCAT, or Fidelity Center for Applied Technology. Fidelity has a rich legacy of and commitment to innovation. We invest deeply in technology, but we've also always recognized that technology is just a tool, and it's really how we apply it that matters. So FCAT was established, way back in 1999 to research and explore emerging technologies and drive innovation across the company. For more than 20 years, FCAT has been a catalyst for breakthrough achievements in research and technology with more than 300 patents. We assess, test, and scale concepts and ideas to advance the needs of both our customers and our employees. So we really monitor trends that we think are going to matter most to our customers, looking out specifically 5 to 10 years ahead to uncover new ideas and opportunities for growth. So ultimately, we prioritize a focus on technology to lay the foundation for the future, one experiment at a time, to build a more responsible platforms and products that will help the next generation of investors take on a future that they and we are only beginning to imagine. So I'm part of the research team within FCAT, and I specifically focus on artificial intelligence and where that is headed over the next 5 years.
Nice. Are there examples of patents that your team's been involved in?
So my team is the research team. We really are focused on outside-in thinking, and we spend more time seeing what other people are doing and then making sure the company is aware of what's going on the outside.
Got it. Interesting.
But there's plenty of other teams in FCAT that are doing the other type of work, testing, scaling, things that lead to new products.
Well, this sounds like a really unique role. That's really cool. All right, so I want to start this episode off, though, with just quick basics, right? So why don't we quickly define AI, artificial intelligence? What is it? What isn't it? And then we'll jump into some deeper questions from there.
Sure. I'll start off with how I define AI because it's different depending on who you talk to. I usually just use it interchangeably with machine learning, which is the area in AI that's really the game changer here. And just to give a quick explanation, so how it's different than more traditional programming is, machine learning is learning from data and the answers, the output, and then the machine basically writes the code for you. What's nice about that is if something changes in the world, instead of having to go back and change hundreds of if statements, you can just give that AI system new data and let it redo everything for you.
Okay.
And I think you also asked about what it isn't. So
Yeah.
AI is not magic. And so in my previous role where I was heading up machine learning teams, we used to we're going to just call ourselves the genies and forget anything about machine learning because people would come to us with no data at all and have any problem they wanted and expect us to solve it with magical machine learning.
It needs data, yes.
Machine learning needs data. It's just math. It's not magic.
Math, not magic. You heard it.
Yes.
Excellent. So, Sarah, what do you see as common? I know your role is research focused on trends in the future and all, but what are some common things that you do see being done with AI in the financial services world?
I'll talk about a couple of Fidelity. We use AI all over the place. Two relatively new businesses that just came out of Fidelity Labs, our in-house software incubator and digital studio, are really harnessing the power of AI and to improve workflows. We have Safer, which helps financial services organizations mitigate brand and regulatory risks by using AI and collaboration tools to reduce the friction in content creation, approvals, and filings. And another project, Catchlight, uses proprietary AI-powered technology to help financial advisors better assess potential leads and tailor pitches to their interests and needs.
That's powerful. All right. So Safer is the one that mitigates risk, right?
Yeah, so Safer is about regulatory risk, and Catchlight is helping financial advisors find potential leads. So AI is used pretty heavily in financial services. Many of us have used chatbots, robo-advisors, even automatic email replies in financial services. Some companies use fraud detection and use AI for underwriting decisions. One area that's very popular is also personalization, because I think nobody wants to be bombarded with hundreds of emails about every new product enhancement. So figuring out which customers should be emailed about different things that are going on. Also, sentiment analysis on data is really used pretty heavily.
So tell us what that is.
Sentiment analysis.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So being able to look at data, whether it's social media data or even just financial documents, and figure out, is this a positive thing, or is this really bad? Is this negative, or neither? And then using that to make investment decisions, as at least as part of a way to make investment decisions. Definitely not as the sole way.
So if all my emails are just mad, what would the investment, what will those decisions be?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because when COVID hit, I think the sentiment we all had on social media was so much more negative that companies that were using sentiment analysis to do investment decisions had to quickly go and change things, because otherwise it
Wow.
was just all down. And that's, I guess, the important lesson with machine learning is it's, if something changes in the world, basically your models are all going to break. And COVID was obviously a pretty big change.
Yeah, you said it. It's all based on data. So all the data coming in, if that the sentiment really did change, but the models weren't prepared for that kind of change, I guess.
Exactly. And I mean, we saw it with all, plenty of other things with the pandemic, trying to buy, who knew that people would want to make bread when a pandemic hit? So definitely machine learning was not prepared for that either.
Definitely true. And guitars. A lot of people bought guitars.
And gardening also.
Gardening. Okay.
It was impossible to find gardening supplies.
So now are these models now prepared to handle gardening and bread?
With the assumption that we all decide, if there's another pandemic, we're going to go back to bread and gardening. What happens if we all decide we're going to do something else completely wacky?
Ooh, wait. So can these models now tell us if when the pandemic is ending because people aren't making bread anymore?
Oh, that actually is an interesting use. I haven't seen anyone do that, but maybe we should start saying, hey,
No more bread, no more music, pandemic's over.
people are going back to work at least and ignoring things. I guess they don't have the time to make bread anymore.
Exactly. Okay, cool. So you bring up a topic though, that models are going to be based on the data that's coming into it, and models may not be prepared for certain types of data. So it kind of comes to mind also another thing, we've heard about biased data. So, I know you've gotten into this research before. Tell me what your thoughts are on how to manage or prepare for, data ethics concerns when it comes to machine learning and AI. What are your thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, definitely. This is an area I've spent a lot of time focusing on. And one example I always like to give to try to explain the issues that could come up with AI to people, because I think we've all applied to jobs at some point. So I like to talk about the example of the big tech company who had to shut down their recruiting system a few years ago. They found it was biased to women. But what was interesting is they didn't want it to be biased. They didn't even give it information on gender, but the system learned it on its own. They were trained on the resumes they received over the last however many years, and most of those were male resumes. And so it learned certain verbs that show up a lot in men's resumes, like execute, automatically upgraded the resumes. Also, if you mention something like, oh, I'm president of a women's chess club, it hadn't seen the word woman, so it just downgraded your resume altogether. And ended up having the same biases that we see with humans. And obviously, once they figured it out, they shut it down. That was not, they did not want to buy a system. But I think that was one of the stories over the last few years that was really like an eye opener to the community, that even if you try to be good about things and not give information that could lead to bias, the system can just learn it through other data. And you were asking about ways to overcome this. So I've seen a few different strategies that companies are taking. A lot of companies are setting up AI ethics boards, which really to oversee all parts of AI projects, including the beginning and deciding, should this even be an AI project or should we use some other way of solving it? There's also plenty of fairness and explainability tools, making sure that we're not, accidentally biased, that can show us what's going on in the systems, especially some of these machine learning systems, which are more black box. Many companies are starting to train people working in AI on topics related to bias and ethics in AI. Things like what are best ways to label your training data? How do you make sure to be more inclusive during beta testing? And so that's another way that people are trying to prepare. Many of us went to school, I think, a few years ago in computer science. There was no such thing as an ethics class as part of the computer science curriculum.
Right, exactly.
Now there's at least one, I would say, for most in most computer science degrees. Some have even more than that, but it's still, not necessarily enough. Once you start actually working in the field, it's good to have more training on these topics. They're not necessarily intuitive.
Can AI or ML help the AI and ML ethics challenge?
Yes.
That's very meta, but what do you think?
I think there are a number of ways AI could help. So from the AI side, I mean, some of these fairness and explainability tools use AI to try to explain what's going on behind the scenes. So that is, AI helping with AI. And there are also, other ways, even when we were talking about training courses, there are ways that we could be using AI to enhance some of the ways we give training, even figuring out, who needs to learn about which topics AI could potentially be involved in. So I do think there are ways we could incorporate, and I think we need to incorporate both humans and AI. But the tools are really, I think, the big way where AI can help us find some of these issues of bias.
You've explained some of the ways AI can be used and your role about doing outside-in research and all of that. So something's come to mind. AI, ML, they're now writing news articles. Computers are writing news articles. Computers are writing stories. Machine learning models are writing music. What's up with that? Is that real? Is it good? How can I tell?
So I think it's great. Of course, I'm biased in this area, speaking of bias, but I've been very fascinated. I've been exploring how well these language models are doing at generating text in different ways. I've been focusing on the computer coding side to see, it used to be it will kind of guess the next few words of what you're trying to type when you code. And now it's like, I'll just write the code for you.
Wait. You're saying that models are now writing code for you to.
Yes. So
that's really meta.
using some of, like, GPT-3 is one of the really popular language models today. And there's Codex, which is built on top of it and is also used by GitHub Copilot. And I've tried it. Anybody can really play with it. And you could, I'll ask it, I want a Python method to compute average, and it just spits it all out. And you can write in your own natural language and get back code. And some of it could be more complex. It doesn't have to only be simple things. And it's, I wouldn't say it's perfect. AI is never perfect. It's not magic, again. But some of it is really, really good. And it's, I think, a great way for people who are, getting started with coding as a new way of learning. And also just as a way to speed up the process of coding, even if you are a really good developer.
Right. So we're used to suggestions in a search engine. If you're typing in words, it will try to complete those words for you. Or if you're writing an email, it will try to complete those words for you. That's machine learning doing natural language processing, right?
Yes.
And what you're saying is it's proactively doing the writing for you before you start typing. And right, is that kind of what you're saying? And it's doing that with code.
And yeah, and the way it's able to do this is if I don't, if you're familiar with code, most, you have to put comments on top of your code. Not that everybody does, but that's the nice thing about if you have comments in your code is, and there's also tons and tons of code on GitHub that it can learn from publicly available code. That this is a great way, other than the fact that, people have usually choose to write code that's friendly to the human, the human to understand by the names of the methods being more self-explanatory and the names of variables being self-explanatory. There's also often comments telling you what the code is doing. So these tools could learn from some of this and try to combine things and to give you the code that you want. And so you could start typing the code and then get all the code back, but you can also just start typing a comment and get all the code back too. And the comment could be in your own language.
That's pretty wild.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's basically the same exact thing that you think of when you start typing in your Gmail, except that it's a lot more and it's code and not just general text.
What are some of the other ways that you're seeing, or maybe even your own organization is using these kinds of capabilities to do writing?
So I'll talk about it more from an exploratory sense rather than just in general. So I've also been
right. Your research, right? Yeah, yeah.
I'm coming from this very different side than many other people who are working in the field. So I've explored it. So my background is coding and is managing AI from the production side. So now my job is really giving talks, writing research papers on where AI is headed. So writing papers is very new to me. So I have explored these tools to see, how well does it help with my writing process? And in some ways, I actually find it to be very valuable. If you're somebody like me who struggles with the title of like, what should I call this thing? I wrote this great thing and I have no idea what to call it. They're actually very good at coming up with you kind of seed it with some information, and it can give you some suggestions for titles. Also, if you're not good at figuring out how do I explain this with an analogy that somebody might understand, you can get an analogy from some of these tools.
That's pretty cool.
The thing you don't want to use the tool for is anything factual, because the way these tools learn is they're learning from data that was anywhere on the internet, and it's making things up, and it's not fact-checking to make sure it's giving you correct information.
I see.
So I actually was exploring it to see if it could give me some interesting partnership ideas out of curiosity. And I started talking about Fidelity and younger investors. And it was said, oh yeah, Fidelity just partnered with My Little Pony, which is not true, by the way, for those of you listening. So don't trust it. That's the only problem. It's great though for just brainstorming and thinking about things differently and how to phrase things, but definitely not factually. I was actually recently speaking with Ben Syverson from IDEO, who used GPT-3 for brainstorming purposes. He was working on a project to figure out how to help people save money, and asked GPT-3 for ideas and got suggestions that were, not necessarily the most brilliant thing in the entire world, but as part of a brainstorming process, they were really, really good suggestions to get a good discussion going to actually come up with a final, product on maybe an idea of what actually could be done.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Interesting. So normally, with our guests, I ask a final question about predicting the future on whatever the subject is that we're talking about. But your whole gig is about predicting the future, and AI, ML is about predicting the future. So why don't we actually make that a thread? So let's just talk about a little bit what you're seeing trends. And your research is leading you toward having some ideas on what's going to come down the line in the future of AI and ML. So let's talk a little bit about what's on your mind there.
Sure. So I'll elaborate on some of the things we touched on. And when it comes to, we talked a lot about automatically writing code. And so I was researching this topic and trying out these tools and realizing how good they are, much better than I anticipated.
Hmm.
And so we decided to see, how well would it work for people in our company to solve their own business pain points. And so we hosted a no code challenge where the only rule was you were not allowed to code. And they spent a week trying no code tools to solve some of their problems. And at the end of the week, we actually had over 700 employees participate, which was
Wow.
the interest was so much more than I could have expected in something like this, and the demos were amazing. And it was really great to see so much interest. And some of these projects are actually like now being looked at to turn into something bigger. And so that really also did tell me like the field of no code, low code is just so much better than we've seen a few years ago, and it's really, really improving, and their tools are getting much more usable that somebody who hadn't looked at a tool a week before could pick it up and, okay, maybe it's not a full-scale product, but create a proof of concept in a week with it is pretty amazing.
How long was that hackathon, your no code challenge? Was that like a day? Was it a week, a month?
Yeah, 1 week challenge. And actually, if I were doing it again, I might have done it for 2 weeks.
Really?
There was feedback that some of the tools, also people were like pivoting from one tool to another, so they would have liked a little bit more time or at least a weekend to kind of go back and try out some tools. So I would go if I were going to do it again. Maybe I would do it 2 weeks. It wasn't full time though. I'll say everybody had their own
They had their day jobs. Yeah.
actual work projects, and so people. But within that week, they chose the time that worked for them to work on a project.
700 people, you said?
Yeah, more than 700.
More than that? That's fantastic. Were they mostly engineers trying to do things without coding, or were they mostly non-engineers trying to get into the game, or what was the demographic?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was actually a mix, and what was amazing about that is we partnered with our Women in Technology group to run this because I was also trying to reach out to different types of people that maybe usually participate in these types of hackathons. And what was people, went over afterwards and said this was so nice to see because there was a woman who went over to the head of this Women in Technology group and said, I have all these ideas and I see these hackathons and I always want to participate, but I don't know how to code, so I just keep my ideas to myself. And now I finally felt like there was a way for me to share, and create a proof of concept.
How awesome.
I think it's also a really nice way to just, we're talking about opening innovation with AI tools and opening brainstorming with AI tools, but just to democratize innovation in terms of also the humans that are working on innovation and able to share their ideas, to open it to pretty much everybody.
Well, there's like big implications to that, right? Within an organization, but also societal, if I could be so bold, right? What did you say? You said it democratizes innovation.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that phrase. What a great phrase. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Democratizes no code using ML democratizes innovation is what I'm hearing you say. And I think that the implication there is pretty impactful. Do you see that becoming something broader than just, any given company can do that internally? Do you see anything broader that might happen in the education space or otherwise? Because you're connecting a bunch of interesting dots, even within Fidelity. Your Women in Code organization, I think you called it. Did I get that right?
Women in Technology.
Women in Technology. Sorry.
Same thing.
Right. So you're connecting a bunch of cool dots there. What are the dots to connect outside of there?
Yeah, so I actually am, very interested in seeing what happens with education as these tools have been improving. So, we talked, about even just the coding becoming easier with use. Also, some of these tools that we've been discussing, like GPT-3, you could give it code and it'll write you step-by-step instructions on what the code is doing. And what I like about that is, speaking of democratizing things, is, not everybody learns well from a classroom, or from reading a book. We all have different ways we learn well. And to me, this is another way for people who don't know how to code or don't know how to code well to learn. And you could just give it code and ask it, explain this code to me. And it's just another tool for learning. You can also get it to translate from one programming language to another. So if you're learning a new programming language.
Yeah.
I also want to speak to outside of coding and education.
Yeah.
So I have a third grade twins, and they don't understand anything that I do. And my husband's a psychologist, so they're always talking to him about his work because it's much easier for them to understand him helping people with their fears than me talking about artificial intelligence and where it's headed. But so I tried something. I took GPT-3 and I said, take some of my, I think I mentioned I spent a lot of time writing research papers for my company. So I said, I'd take some of my papers, at least parts of it, and explain this to a second grader, explain this to a young child. And I got back different paragraphs, and I was like, okay, kids, you're my guinea pigs right now. Could you understand what this is saying? And surprisingly, so my son was actually like explaining. He was able to understand it. He was asking follow-up questions,
Nice.
And what was amazing to me is also, I don't want to compare any of us to kids, but like sometimes I read an academic paper and I get like a little bit lost in it sometimes, and there's like all this jargon, and so to me also in terms of education, I do think there's something here about simplifying text into way easier, less jargonful writing that anybody
Right.
can understand.
Oh, that's such a good point. Right. We could all be third graders.
Exactly. Like, I mean, I would much rather read some of these things catered to a third grader than to assuming somebody has all this extra knowledge.
That's fascinating. Oh, that's really cool.
There's one other topic not related to this, but that I think is just interesting, because we were speaking earlier about AI and bias, and I've been seeing a lot of tools kind of flipping things, taking AI and helping people be more inclusive. So I think that's a nice counterpoint to some of the discussion going on with AI. And I'll give some examples. I did not do this before our podcast. Maybe I should have, but like sometimes before some of my talks, I'll go to PowerPoint and you can get, rehearse, and it'll give you feedback on, if your phrases that you're using as you're speaking are inclusive, could they hurt someone, cause harm? And sometimes it's a nice way to just get that extra, suggestions on things you might not think about, because it's really hard to think about everything. There are plenty of tools that do that with writing also. And so I do think it's very interesting that there are, so many ways that we could use tools like AI to be more inclusive. And that's got me thinking about a lot of going back to our discussion on fairness and explainability tools. When I think about like that resume example of the word woman's automatically downgrading a resume, that was AI bias. But maybe there are humans that have the same bias and don't necessarily know it. So if I'm looking at a resume and I know, AI might negatively flag that because of the word women's, I can start thinking about it and saying, hey, do I do the same thing? Do I do something similar? Another recent example, or more recent example, there was a video recruiting tool that assumed you were more conscientious if you have a bookshelf behind you.
I don't have a bookshelf. No, I don't.
Do you have a bookshelf behind you? I always want to drag my bookshelf over so everybody can see it.
There's probably one on the other side there for you.
I don't believe you.
No, on your side.
Oh, on my side there is, yeah.
You have bookshelves. I know you have I'm sure you have bookshelves.
I know, but I was like, I need to change my angle when I saw that. I'm like, so everybody could see that I'm smart.
You're a researcher. You have bookshelves. I'm sure you do.
What was interesting about this is the fact that AI, we found out, okay, AI has this bias that it has, but it made me think, do I have that bias? Like maybe I do. Like if I'm talking to you now and I saw your bookshelf with all these intellectual books behind you, maybe I'll assume, this person must be really smart. You could have just ordered them on Amazon and never read them. But we make assumptions because we're human.
That's how I roll.
And so it made me think about if we could know all, these AI tools are showing us the AI bias, maybe we can start thinking about it for ourselves and think about, do we have this bias? And I think that's another way that AI could help us, be more inclusive.
The possibilities here are endless, Sarah. So think about for hiring managers, especially new hiring manager, well, just any hiring manager, I guess, teaching people, like maybe record them video, and it could teach people how to interview in an inclusive way also, right? You talked about resume screening, but actual interviewing technique, you also mentioned presentations techniques, right? So interviewing is really also the same sort of thing, and doing inclusivity training by watching how you do an interview could be really powerful. Do you think that's another opportunity? Like, the possibilities are endless here. Do you see that coming?
Yeah, and I see the reason I think it's even almost like we've been seeing it with writing, but speaking in a way is almost more critical because sometimes we speak without thinking more often than we write without thinking. In my emails, I don't want to tell you how many times I go back and change my words around. Can't always do that when I'm speaking, but if so, using some of these tools and mocking an interview beforehand will at least get you more aware of phrases you use without even realizing
I
it.
think I thought of a question because this interview is really special. We're spending the whole time talking about the future, trends in the future, and that's normally my final question. So I have a new final question just for you. And that final question is, what did you predict that didn't come true? How about that?
Okay, so I have that is a good question. I will talk about something that didn't come true at the time that I predicted it. I was researching the topic of future of work, and goes back to 2018, maybe.
Uh-huh.
It goes back a while. It's one of the first things I worked on when I joined Fidelity in this role. And I told everyone that by 2025, we need to be prepared for this more flexible, work environment. And I basically described everything that started happening, since 2020. And, people will just show up from anywhere they want and they'll be able, working. And I went on and on and on with all these things we need to do. And I was right and I was wrong. So that's...
Right. You're ahead of your time.
Everything I said was correct. It just happened way earlier than I expected. And, I think before anybody was prepared for it.
Your prediction was ahead of its time. Well done.
Yeah, it's like I called it associate experience 2025. I was like, this is what we need to prepare for our employees come 2025. Even my title this year. And so I was wrong and right.
So what haven't we touched on here that we should? What else is on your mind?
So one other thing I would mention, we were talking earlier about what companies are doing to try to help with the topic of AI bias.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that one thing that I wish more companies were doing is trying to get more diversity into the field of AI, because I do think that it's really hard for people who are all, more similar to figure out the possible issues that could happen to everybody. And so the more diversity we could bring into the field, I think the easier it will be to find potential issues. Somebody can be like, okay, hey, that would not work for somebody like me. So that's, I guess I would add to that discussion is if, the more we could bring in more diversity into technology and AI, that would really be a game changer here.
Well, right. So maybe you already have the answer, and that's your no-code challenge.
Exactly. Yeah,
for the populace in general, right? Maybe we already have the answer to that, and we find ways to get tools like that into hackathons in schools. Right?
Oh, yeah. And one very interesting thing that I should mention is related to that. So we had one team actually that was children of Fidelity employees. They wanted to participate. They were 12. And it was actually amazing that they were able to take a no-code tool, use it, and create an application that was something that they would want to see for financial services. Yeah, I'm like, wow, this could even work for 12-year-olds. Like, this could work for, for anybody. And so I do think that this is an amazing way to get more people part of this discussion.
Right. How cool is that? I got to participate in a hackathon with Random Hacks of Kindness, if I'm allowed to say organization names, but it was junior Random Hacks of Kindness, and it was a bunch of kids who knew more than I knew, and it was so much fun. They got to create stuff. It was great, and I think it inspired some to start pursuing STEM, right, as a thing at a young age, and I think it was really cool to watch.
Yeah, I do think those are great ways to get people into the field that might not have even considered it in another setting.